Hello everyone. Let us discuss a very important topic, congenital diaphragmatic hernia. It is one of the favorite topics of NEET PG examiners, and because difficult questions are asked from this topic, if you are thorough with the concepts and the one-liners, it can be a really rewarding topic for you. So let us begin with the discussion. The name itself is saying congenitals. Congenital means since birth, diaphragmatic hernia means there is a herniation occurring from the diaphragm. So according to Nelson, a diaphragmatic hernia is a communication between the abdominal and thoracic cavities with or without actual herniation happening or not. So when you know that there is a thoracic cavity which has a negative pressure and there is abdominal cavity which has a positive pressure. The two cavities are separated by a structure called as diaphragm. Diaphragm plays multiple important roles with essential role in respiration as well. If there is some congenital defect in that structure, the abdominal contents can herniate into the thorax depending upon the size. That condition is called as diaphragmatic hernia. So what is congenital diaphragmatic hernia? What is the definition? Definition says it is a communication. It is a communication between the abdominal cavity and the thoracic cavity due to diaphragmatic defect. Although the name is hernia, Nelson 21st edition very clearly says the actual herniation of abdominal contents into thorax may or may not happen when you diagnose the condition. Right? So there are multiple types of diaphragmatic hernia which can be seen. Now if you go into anatomy, there is a Morgagni's hernia which is more anteriorly seen. There is a central hernia, there is a hiatus hernia, but the most common congenital diaphragmatic hernia is the Bowdel-X hernia. And in fact, diaphragmatic hernia in children and Bowdel-X hernia are synonymously used. So the most common variety which is synonymous with diaphragmatic hernia is Bowdel-X hernia. So Bowdel-X hernia is more than 90% cases of congenital diaphragmatic hernia. What are the things about this that you need to know? First point, it is more common on the left side compared to right side. Almost 90% more on the left side as compared to right side. Secondly, it is more commonly present posteriorly compared to anteriorly. And the third important thing is females are more commonly affected than males by a ratio of 2:1. Most of these cases, most congenital diaphragmatic hernia patients, it is found to be a sporadic condition. However, about 10 to 15% patients are found to be part of a syndrome. So we call it as syndromic diaphragmatic hernia. So the obvious MCQ arises, what are the common syndromes which can be associated with diaphragmatic hernia? So first common syndrome is trisomy 21, that is Down syndrome. Second common syndrome is trisomy 18, that is Edwards syndrome. Third common syndrome associated with CDH is trisomy 13, that is Patau. Fourth is Turner syndrome. And fifth, which can be asked because it is a bit atypical, that is Pallister-Killian syndrome. So these are the 5 important syndromes associated with congenital diaphragmatic hernia. However, you need to understand that in the vast majority of patients, it is an isolated defect which does not have any association with any underlying disease. Now, when we talk about diaphragmatic hernia, it is important to understand the pathophysiology of the condition and why the disease is happening. If you understand pathophysiology, trying to understand the drugs involved and the treatment regimes become a bit more easy to digest. So, what is the embryological basis and pathophysiology of congenital diaphragmatic hernia? Let us try to understand how the diaphragm is getting formed. If you look at the fetal life, particularly between 6 to 12 weeks of gestation, the developing diaphragm looks something like this. What are the major structures which you can see here? Anteriorly, you can see that there is a structure called as transverse septum or septum transversum. And on the lateral sides, which is on the posteriorly, you will find there are structures called as right pleuroperitoneal fold and left pleuroperitoneal fold. These structures, they combine with the muscular body wall and various other structures arising from various organs, and together they constitute the bulk of diaphragm. So, it is the left pleuroperitoneal fold which is implicated in majority of cases of congenital diaphragmatic hernia. When it fails to fuse completely with the transverse septum, there is a gap which is left here through which at this side through where the herniation can develop. And so the MCQ point arises here. Most of the patients of congenital diaphragmatic hernia, they have defect in fusion of a structure called as pleuroperitoneal fold. This is also an anatomy question, embryology question asked in AIIMS entrance exam in 2015. So, most CDH patients, they have what is the embryological basis? Defect in the fusion of pleuroperitoneal fold. Since this defective fusion is more common on the left side than the right side, that is why congenital diaphragmatic hernia is more common on the left side as compared to right side. So, this is the embryological basis. Now, you need to understand the pathophysiology, what exactly is happening here. Let us try to look at the trunk here. This is the diaphragm, this is your thoracic cavity which has a negative pressure, and this is your abdominal cavity which has a positive pressure. Remember that most diaphragmatic hernia patients have a defect in the diaphragm somewhere around 10 weeks of gestation. So, what will happen? If you what happens during development of any child is that the abdominal contents like stomach, intestine, mesentery, they all tend to develop earlier as compared to development of pulmonary parenchyma. So, what will happen? There will be intestinal loop, stomach, mesentery, they will be forming in the abdomen. But the upper area, the thorax, it still does not have proper lung formation yet happening. There are only lung buds which are present there. So, in case there is a defect which is more commonly on the left side, there is a gap like this. What it will do is, it will cause herniation of abdominal contents into the thoracic cavity. So, imagine that there is an intestinal loop which is now coming and herniating into the thoracic cavity. So, it has occupied the space where future lung parenchyma is yet to form. Now, as age advances in a fetus, the time of lung parenchyma formation will come. But the place where this structure is present, lung will not form in that area. So, it will cause ipsilateral pulmonary hypoplasia. That means, on the side where herniation has happened, there will be variable degree of pulmonary hypoplasia. Hypoplasia means kam banega, less formation. So, there will be pulmonary hypoplasia on the affected side. This will interrupt the normal lung development on the other side also. And so, the remaining lung tissue which forms, it has aberrant vessels which have high pressure. We call it as persistent pulmonary hypertension. So, when a child of diaphragmatic hernia is born, he is not having just one problem, he is having 3 problems. What are the 3 problems? First problem is the defect itself. Second problem is, on the same side, there is a lack of lung development properly, we call it as pulmonary hypoplasia. And on the other side, as well as in the remaining lung tissue, there will be raised pressure called as pulmonary hypertension. It is the combination of these which produces all the clinical symptoms, and our therapy is also directed towards management of these conditions. So, if I have to summarize whatever I just told you, there is presence of diaphragmatic defect. Due to this diaphragmatic defect, there will be herniation. There may be herniation of abdominal contents into thorax. They will cause ipsilateral, same-sided pulmonary hypoplasia along with pulmonary hypertension in the remaining normally forming lung. And it is the combination of these two which tends to produce respiratory distress in the neonatal period. In addition, Nelson says that approximately 20% patients are also found to have variable degrees of intestinal problems, which includes malrotation. So, you can put a star and write malrotation of the intestine is also a feature of congenital diaphragmatic hernia. Although it comes to attention a bit later, it is the respiratory problems which come to attention earlier. So, this is the pathophysiology of this condition. So, let us now discuss the clinical features of congenital diaphragmatic hernia. If we talk about clinical features, the cardinal clinical presentation of these children is respiratory distress. Respiratory distress occurs in the form of tachypnea, that is rapid breathing, there is grunting, and there is chest wall retractions. So, increased work of breathing will be seen. The onset of this respiratory distress can happen either within 6 hours of birth, or it can happen at or beyond 6 hours of birth. Usually children who have onset within 6 hours of birth are found to have a relatively poor prognosis. It means that the child, the hypoplasia, pulmonary hypertension was so severe that the child was unable to compensate even for the first 6 hours of life. So, it usually carries a poor prognosis. However, respiratory distress can be delayed up to 48 hours of birth in some patients. And these patients who have delayed in respiratory distress, we say these children are in honeymoon period. Honeymoon period is not something which I have created, even Nelson talks about it. Honeymoon period is defined as a phase in various disorders where the disease is present but it is not manifesting itself. So, going away from academics, even Nelson and all these textbooks agree that marriage is a disease. Honeymoon period, after marriage people go on honeymoon, everything looks fine, but so the disease is there but it is not manifesting itself. Once you are back to normal life, you realize that it's not worth it. So, stupid logic but always works. Honeymoon period, this is a stupid way to remember. This is how my professors taught me and this is how I am teaching you. Honeymoon period, wherever you find this term being asked in pediatrics, in medicine, it always refers to a state where the disease is present but it is not manifesting itself. So, when distress is delayed beyond 48 hours, these children are said to be in honeymoon period. Remember that when it is delayed beyond 48 hours, sometimes it can be delayed to as late as beyond the neonatal period also. There is a very small subset of patients where it can be delayed beyond neonatal period also, and these children will usually present with the intestinal features. So, the first feature is respiratory distress in these children. The second feature which you find on physical examination is scaphoid abdomen. Scaphoid abdomen is also called as boat-shaped abdomen. There is a depression in the central part of abdominal cavity, we call it as scaphoid abdomen. It is a very, very useful point. It is a key word which is mentioned in clinical MCQs. If MCQ says newborn born with scaphoid abdomen, the first thing which should come to your mind is congenital diaphragmatic hernia is being talked about. In addition, other things which can be seen, they include mediastinal shift to the right, because herniation is happening on the left side. So, mediastinum, apex beat, they will shift to the right side. And fourth feature, there will be increased chest wall diameter. Increased chest wall diameter. And sometimes you may be able to auscultate vowel sounds in the chest wall. So, breath sounds will be decreased on the affected side, vowel sounds in the chest may be heard. So, may be heard. So, it is a plus minus condition which can be sometimes seen in diaphragmatic hernia. In those patients who present late, they may present with vomiting due to intestinal obstruction. So, intestinal obstructive features are relatively rare but can be seen. Coming to investigations, prenatally it can be seen, it can be detected in more than 50% patients by ultrasonography between the age of 16 to 24 months. So, most of these children, it can be diagnosed in utero by the obstetrician before birth. Whereas, chest X-ray is usually the investigation that is performed whenever you have a patient presenting with diaphragmatic hernia. When you do chest X-ray, you will find that there is a dilated bowel loop in the thoracic cavity with or without mediastinal shift. So, how would the chest X-ray look like? Let us have a look. Look at this chest X-ray. Can you see that there is a mediastinal shift which is happening to the right, plus there are dilated bowel loops which are present on the affected side. Question will tell you that there was a child who developed respiratory distress soon after birth. He was having scaphoid abdomen and chest X-ray is shown below. This is the typical X-ray you will find in such a child, where there is a mediastinal shift along with air fluid levels or dilated bowel loops being present on the right or on the left side where the herniation is developing. So, this is a typical hallmark chest X-ray of congenital diaphragmatic hernia. Let us now talk about the management of congenital diaphragmatic hernia. We will not do management in a typical form, we will do it in a flowchart form, so it is easy for you to remember and also write in theory paper as well as for your revise for your MCQs. So, whenever there is a baby who is born with either antenatally diagnosed CDH or the baby is having, there is a baby with scaphoid abdomen with or without mediastinal shift, you will suspect congenital diaphragmatic hernia. So, there can be two possibilities here. If there is no respiratory distress in the patient, if the question says just child with scaphoid abdomen or kuch nahi, no respiratory distress, distress is not yet started. It can be because the child can be in honeymoon period, distress is not yet started. So, what management you will do? You will not intubate the child, you will not start ventilation, you will insert a nasogastric tube, right, and you will keep the upper end open. This upper end opening will ensure that the intra-abdominal pressure does not rise. When you put a nasogastric tube, you keep the upper end open, it will ensure that there is no sudden rise in abdominal pressure and herniation remains restricted to where it is. If needed, you can apply small negative pressure or suction to this nasogastric tube. So, what is your aim here? Aim is to keep the intra-abdominal pressure low till surgery can be done. So, what should be the next step? If there is no respiratory distress, insert nasogastric tube. In case the patient is having respiratory distress, then you have to manage the respiratory part first, and so the first step to be done in these patients is intubate the patient, put a endotracheal tube and start positive pressure ventilation. So, you intubate and start with the positive pressure ventilation. 3 MCQs on this have been asked in the past, including 1 in NEET and 2 in AIIMS entrance exam. I hope you already know that bag and mask ventilation is contraindicated in patients of congenital diaphragmatic hernia. This is also another MCQ. So, the first step you will do is you will intubate and start the patient on positive pressure ventilation. Once you have intubated, post intubation, you will insert a nasogastric tube just like you did there also. But now you will not just keep the upper end open, you will perform a procedure called as nasogastric decompression. So, now you will apply a significant gradually rising negative pressure so that the intra-abdominal cavity tends to decompress, the abdominal pressure rapidly falls and whatever herniation has happened, it tries to come back so that the lungs are able to expand a bit. Basically, you are trying to, not only maintain the airway, maintain the ventilation part, but also allowing lungs to expand a bit more. So, this is a small procedure which is done after intubation. Please remember, if there is no distress, you first put nasogastric tube. If the patient is in distress, you first intubate and then perform nasogastric intubation. Now, once nasogastric decompression has been done, you put the patient on ventilation. So, ventilation is continued. What are the things regarding ventilation that you should remember? Initially, you start with conventional ventilation. You start with conventional ventilation and you allow permissive hypercapnia. Permissive hypercapnia means that you keep the settings on the lower side. All the ventilatory settings like PIP, PEEP, you keep it on the lower side and you allow some degree of carbon dioxide retention to happen. Now, ventilate a person, we aim that PCO2 should not rise beyond 40 millimeters of mercury. But in these children, Nelson says that you up to 65 to 70 millimeters of PaCO2 can be accepted. If it remains around 45-50, that is fine. But up to 65 to 70, iske beyond nahi jana, you have to keep it less than that. You start with conventional ventilation. If the conventional ventilation fails, you put the patient on, start. If it fails, you have tried ventilation, patient is not improving, saturation is on the lower side, distress is still persisting, you will start the patient on HFOV. HFOV stands for high frequency oscillometric ventilation. And if HFOV also fails, you will do two things. You will give a trial of drugs which decrease the pulmonary pressure. Because remember, pulmonary hypertension is also one of the problems. So the drugs which are useful, you will give a trial of inhaled nitric oxide. You will give a trial of this. If that is not available, you can also give a trial of sildenafil. Nitric oxide as well as sildenafil are vasodilators. They act on the pulmonary vasculature and decrease the pulmonary pressures. Inhaled nitric oxide is more useful than sildenafil. In fact, sildenafil is not mentioned in some of the books, whereas some of the Indian textbooks and articles do mention about it. Inhaled NO is not available at all centers, and so in practice we do sometimes give a trial of sildenafil. But inhaled nitric oxide is a drug. It is more of a bridge therapy, right? And if it fails, eventually the last step in management is ECMO. ECMO stands for extracorporeal membrane oxygenation. This is the so-called Brahmastra in the management of CDH. The final frontier, the final thing which can be done. If the patient does not survive on ECMO, the patient is not expected to survive, because ECMO is the last step. So even if the drugs are not available or if they fail, then eventual management of the patient is ECMO. We put the patient on ECMO. It is a heart-lung machine. You oxygenate the patient and try to wait till the patient comes out of the respiratory distress. Once the patient, now what is the role of surgery? Once the patient is stable for 48 hours or longer, you will plan surgical correction. You can put a graft material over the missing diaphragmatic part. So plan surgical correction in the baby. Remember that emergency surgery is avoided in CDH. It has a higher mortality. So when the patient is stable for more than 48 hours, the patient is on conventional ventilation, FiO2 levels are less than 50% and the ventilatory settings are less, you plan surgical correction. Normally what a crude way is, ECMO patient, if you are able to taper him from ECMO back to normal ventilation, that is the right time you can do surgery in the patient. Normally, second week of life we do surgery because it takes some days for these patients to be stabilized. But there is no role of emergency surgery. This is an old MCQ asked already in entrance exam. Severe CDH, which of the following has no role? There were 4 options. One of the option was emergency surgery and that was your answer of choice. So this is how you manage a patient of congenital diaphragmatic hernia. Let us move towards the prognostic factors. Prognostic factors in which determine the outcome in CDH. Adverse prognosis or poor prognosis is seen if any of the following is present. If the onset of distress occurs less than 24 hours, particularly in the first 6 hours, then it is a poor prognostic factor. Secondly, if there are associated major anomalies, like there is a cardiovascular disease associated, then it carries a poor prognosis. If there is pulmonary hypoplasia, degree of pulmonary hypoplasia determines क्या outcome होगा, because you can do everything but lung cannot be created again. Pulmonary hypoplasia is considered to be a more important prognostic factor than degree of pulmonary hypertension, although pulmonary hypertension itself is also a cause. Herniation to the contralateral lung carries a poor prognosis. If there is need for ECMO, that is ECMO, it carries a poor outcome. Antenatal ultrasound, if you do and you find either that there is liver in the thoracic cavity, liver herniate ho gaya hai, some part of liver is herniating, or if the lung to head ratio, we write it as LHR ratio, if it is less than 1. We look at the size of the contralateral normal lung and compare it with, take out the ratio with the fetal head. If it is less than 1, again they both carry a poor prognosis. So these are the poor outcome factors that you need to remember. They are very frequently asked in Central Institute exams, less frequently asked in NEET PG, but you cannot trust the examiners. When you are doing a topic, you do it inside out. And Nelson says size of defect is a major determinant of morbidity. How severe will be the features will be determined by size of the defect. Large defect, more herniation, more pulmonary hypoplasia, more symptoms will be there. After surgery, what are the post-operative complications? Those who survive, what are the complications seen in later life in children who survive? They include GERD, gastroesophageal reflux disease, occurs in more than 50% patients. You find that neurocognitive defects, various types of learning disorders and some intellectual disability, it occurs in 10 to 30% patients, more in children who received ECMO. Sensory neural hearing loss can be seen in some of these patients, particularly those who received ECMO, and recurrence of the defect, recurrence of CDH, can occur in 5 to 20% of these individuals. Finally, we come to two extra edge things so that the topic is entirely covered, nothing is left in the topic. What are the extra edge things that you need to remember for your exams? First of all, there is a concept called as FETO. What is FETO? FETO stands for fetal endoluminal tracheal occlusion. It is a type of fetal surgery which is performed, which helps in lung expansion, and it improves the overall outcome in a patient with CDH. What we exactly do in this condition? Let us try to have a look. So this photograph is showing you the procedure of FETO. In FETO procedure, under ultrasound guidance, we insert a catheter into the trachea. Then it has at its tip, it has a balloon. This balloon is inflated to produce tracheal occlusion. This tracheal occlusion creates a pressure which paradoxically helps the hypoplastic lung to expand. It improves the surfactant production and improves the overall outcome. That is called as FETO procedure. So it is a type of fetal surgery. Suppose there was a pregnant female, 18 weeks there was ultrasound done. On ultrasound, you found that there is a congenital diaphragmatic hernia. So you will refer the lady to a higher center where this procedure is now increasingly being performed. This procedure is usually done around 28 weeks of gestation, but not beyond 30 weeks, and this balloon which is occluded, it is removed somewhere around 34 weeks before delivery, and then we allow the lung to expand and normal delivery to proceed. What this helps is in the hypoplastic lung, in the affected lung, in the compressed lung, it helps in the expansion of that lung and improves the overall outcome. It is the new therapy, new fetal surgery which is being performed in congenital diaphragmatic hernia. So this is something that can be asked in your entrance exam. And the last thing is the MCQ scenario. There is an MCQ scenario which is very frequently asked in entrance exams. The scenario goes something like this. There was a child Here we are discussing a MCQ approach. So child came to you with CDH, the child was intubated but and started on positive pressure ventilation. But instead of improving, the child worsened on intubation and mediastinal shift to the right also increased. What to do in such patients? So you will have many clinical scenarios if you will practice questions of the past years based upon this thing. So stepwise we will move. Whenever you have such scenario, it happens in real life also. First of all, you will confirm कि जो tube डाला है that is properly placed or not. So you will confirm the position of endotracheal tube, whether it is in the trachea only or you have put into esophagus, right? And how do you confirm position of endotracheal tube? It is done by capnography. You cannot do it by a chest X-ray. So capnography, you will check for end-tidal carbon dioxide measurement. So you will check for EtCO2 measurement and look for the position of endotracheal tube. Now there can be three possibilities. If the endotracheal tube is in esophagus, तो आपने गलत ट्यूब डाला है. This is very common in the first year of residency when you move into MD. So the tube is in wrong place. So that is why the child is not improving, because all the air is now going into stomach. It is not going to the lungs and it is expanding the intra-abdominal cavity. So it is worsening the patient. So if you find that capnography shows ET in esophagus, you will remove tube and re-intubate. If the tube is correctly placed, the patient will start improving. Second scenario, the endotracheal tube is in trachea. Trachea में ही है. So now, if the patient is worsening, that means probably this abdominal cavity pressure is on the higher side. So you will urgently do nasogastric decompression and increase the ventilatory settings. Maybe it is a severe form of CDH. And third scenario, capnography is not available, which is very common in a resource limited country like ours. Or capnography is not given in MCQ, option ही नहीं है. So what to do next? In such a scenario, you will remove tube and re-intubate. When in doubt, there is a common saying in critical care medicine and pediatrics, when in doubt, you intubate, still in doubt, re-intubate. So if capnography is not available, you should suspect it could be one of the reasons that it has probably gone into esophagus. You will very humbly remove the tube, re-intubate, and if the tube you are sure that it is clinically you are sure that it is in trachea only, you will proceed according to these settings what I have mentioned here. There is no role of emergency surgery. Everything which has been asked in one way or the other in the last many years of entrance exam and what is mentioned in all the standard books including Nelson, Ghai and CDT Pediatrics is now in this module. So practice it and so read it and practice it in your MCQs. This finishes the topic of CDH.